Welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. I am your co-host, Marcus. There's your other co-host, Mason. Today we are breaking down the 2024 Tennessee Volunteers. Mason and I are on our countdown to kickoff. We're previewing what we, as of right now, see as the 35 most influential teams headed into the 2024 season and teams that we feel like have a really good opportunity to make an impact on the college football playoff. Mason, how are you today, man? Are you ready to talk some orange football, baby?
I think, first of all, I'm doing good, but I think I'm more ready to talk about Tennessee football this year, this preseason, this offseason than I have been in several years. I mean,
Yeah.
the sky is the limit for this team. As we're looking into it, a lot of players, they're better than they've been in a long time. Definitely the best under Josh Heupel, but I think that they're probably, as far as preseason hype, I think that they should be as high as they were heading into the 2016 season when they had Joshua Dobbs and were picked to win the SEC and things like that. I'm not picking them to win the SEC, but as far as roster talent, I think that they're up there with that 2016 team.
Yeah, it was a decent season for all intents and purposes last year, and I guess that's where we'll kind of dive into this thing. Well, and before we do that, I do want to tell everybody, here's what we do on these things, right? We're going to break each position group down. We're going to go quarterback, offensive line, running back, wide receiver, all that. Defense, we're going to do the same. We'll talk about the coordinators. We're going to, at the end of the video, we're going to break down the schedule for the 2024 season. And Mason and I will put our predictions out there, and we'll see how we fare at the end of the year. And this, like we said, this is a series. We've done this for Tennessee is number 14, as you'll see at the top of your screen there. So we've done about 20 or so of these bad boys, and they're being released every single day. So what you need to do, hit the subscribe button. We hope that you'll consider doing that, and give us a like. And if we miss something or we got something mixed up, because it does happen, college football rosters are as confusing as they've ever been. Please let us know in the comment section. We'd love to hear from you, and we are super responsive there. We're not going anywhere, folks. We're going to be doing this show all year long. We did it last year, had a good time. We've got some new improved ideas for the show this year. We're going to have multiple live shows a week. We're going to have a really good time, and we hope that you will consider joining us. Let's jump into this thing, Mason, and we're going to talk kind of what happened last year for just a minute, and then we'll jump into the offense. 9-4 season last year, 4-4 in the SEC. Mason, honestly, things kind of went as you would expect, I think, after a guy like Hendon Hooker leaves the program. I think the only thing that really sticks out to me about last year that really just there was no real excuse for was the loss to Florida. I mean, that game, and I know Tennessee fans are still probably banging their head against the wall about that game. Florida just ran the ball all over Tennessee, and that was not the Tennessee that I saw the whole rest of the year, Mason. It was a different team that showed up that day. And look, we all know about the rich, history, rivalry, tradition, whatever you want to call it, between these two teams, Tennessee and Florida. That's just SEC football, right? We've all got 4 or 5 different rivals, right? But Tennessee's just had the worst luck against Florida, Mason, and really no excuse for it. I mean, it's one of those things in college football that you're just like, this just doesn't make any sense. But other than that, lost a game to Georgia. Really, that game wasn't really that close. 4 touchdowns, I believe, was ended up being the difference in that game. Lost to Alabama. And then you had one more penciled in there too that it's slipping my mind who else you lost to. Was it Auburn? Anyway, nonetheless, a couple of those losses were to teams that either should have been in the playoff or were in the playoff. So I don't think
Missouri, by the way.
Missouri, and that's right. And Tennessee had kind of owned Missouri for a couple years there, 60-plus points, a couple years in a row on Missouri. And then all of a sudden, Missouri came out with a whole new defense last year for that game. If you want to go back and watch that game, Missouri's defense did things in that game that they haven't done. They didn't do all year last year. Totally different scheme. They had something for this Tennessee team, and that Missouri-Tennessee rivalry is really starting to heat up, even throughout the offseason with all the crap talking that's went on. Man, just being a spectator, watching all the interviews, hearing about all this, the stand on business remarks, blah, blah, blah. Man, it makes these games all the more entertaining. What were your thoughts on the team last year? The defense took a really nice step in the right direction. We're going to talk about the defense in a few minutes. Offense, I felt like took a step back. Injury bug got a hold of them in the wide receiver room. Didn't have the playmakers that you'd had a couple years prior. Joe Milton had his issues. What were your thoughts on last year? Those were just a few of the things, not to even mention the secondary that was an issue last year as well.
Yeah, I think given that they were 9-4 with Joe Milton at quarterback, I thought that was a pretty big success story for Tennessee. I did not like Joe Milton. I wasn't a huge fan of him going into the season. Hell of arm strength, but really struggled with the intermediate passes, and we just never saw him really get much better, even from his time at Michigan. It seemed like from then all the way through until he was gone, he was kind of the same quarterback. A lot of overthrows, just didn't quite find the touch. It felt like throughout his college career, but I saw really good offensive line play, which was really nice to see for Tennessee. And with a good offensive line comes really good rushing, a really good rushing attack, and that's what I really saw was Jalen Wright going for over 1,000 yards. Dylan Sampson, adds a little bit of a different dynamic, super fast, but also not afraid to get physical and all-purpose back, no doubt. And then Jabari Small also getting his fair share, almost 500 yards for him. I mean, you had three rushing running backs rush for over almost 500 yards each. So I thought it was really impressive in the running game, which is for people who aren't Tennessee fans who maybe don't know that's really what this offense is designed to do. They do some interesting things in spreading the football out. Which you would think would open up the aerial attack, and of course they did that in 2022 very successfully. But last year they spread the field out and then gash you up the middle. And so I think this year you're going to see Nico Iamaleava kind of complement the passing game a little bit better. You're still going to get really strong offensive line play and also a strong rushing attack. So I think this year, kind of turning the page here, this is a team and an offense that can do anything at once. It's going to be very well balanced, and I'm excited to see what Josh Heupel's able to do when he's got all of his pieces at his disposal. And this offense, I think, is just going to be really a weapon for this team.
I have to tip my hat to Josh Heupel because there were times at the beginning of his Tennessee tenure that I have to be honest, I didn't think that it was going to work out, and mainly that first year, and just because of the way the offenses ran, I feel like sometimes it can be a little bit gimmicky. I'm not trying to be, a butt about that or something. I'm not trying to, you know, the offense was a certain flavor, right? And I was concerned about how it would work in the SEC. And then 2022, it just shut me right up, right? It was one of the best offenses in the country. And if you look at this team over the last 3 years, this team has rushed for over 2,500 yards each of the last 3 years. That's never been done in school history. They're third in the last 3 years cumulative behind Georgia and Ohio State as far as points per game on offense, right around 40 points per game. So that's good for third in the country over the last 3 years. And the other two teams that are ahead of you, as I said, Georgia and Ohio State, we all know where they've been over the last few years, right? Riddled in throughout college football playoff, national championships, conference championships, all that good stuff. So that's really good company as far as the offense goes. And like we said, they were hamstrung. I mean, literally, there was the guys that were hamstrung in that wide receiver room, and things that were a lot worse than a hamstring. So you're going to get a lot of those guys back. You're going to bring in some really good talent into this team this coming up year. To look at all that stuff, Mason, I feel like to give us a good bird's eye view of the program headed into 2024, what I really wanted to start doing with these videos is let's look at the recruiting rankings by year. We don't have to go look at every recruit, but we can all come to the conclusion that you need to recruit within a certain level in the SEC to be competitive, right? And starting in 2020, number 11 class, 21, number 23 class, 22, number 15 class, 23, number 12 class, 24, number 13 class. Those are pretty good classes, Mason. Look, TCU has showed us, Washington has showed us over the last couple of years. Hell, even Michigan, if you really want to look at Michigan, Michigan hasn't been a top 10 recruiting team, right? All these teams went and played for a national championship, or one of them actually won a national championship last year, as we saw. So I'm not saying that you can't win a national championship, without being in the top 5 in recruiting. That's obviously not true. It's been unproven recently. But you do have to be within a certain level to be competitive week in and week out. And you've got to be really deep in the SEC as well. So talent acquisition is really important. I feel like this coach gets I would say like a B as far as recruiting grade. I think it's above average. It's more than acceptable. It could be better. It could be a little bit better. I feel like Tennessee could use the transfer portal a little bit more too, possibly. Number 47 and 22, number 36 and 23, number 31 and 24. But with all that being said, this is a program that is very healthy. I'm not, it is a very talented team, but I feel like for Tennessee to get to that next level, Mason, you're going to need to bring in some of those top 5 classes, at least the 1 or 2. And you're going to need to get some 5-stars on campus, right? Obviously, you've got Nico. I believe Brew McCoy may have been a 5-star, but you've got to get some more of that top end talent in there. Josh Heupel's done a great job. Hat tip to you, sir. But his work is not done. What do you think about these numbers? We got a record versus rivals down there at the bottom right of that slide as well. 1-3 against Alabama, 1-3 against Florida, 0-4 against Georgia, and 4-0 against Vandy. So good to go against Vandy, which, that sounds silly to even say out loud, but there was a little bit of time there where Vandy was kind of, giving Tennessee a little bit of run for their money before Josh Heupel showed up. So Josh, a lot of people like to call him Josh Hopeful. And whenever he came in, a lot of people were hopeful that it was going to work out for him. What do you think about these numbers? What do they mean to you? I think Tennessee is absolutely on the right track. I think they're just a couple of really good players away over the next couple of years. And by the way, they just got a couple, but I think they're a couple players away from being able to really make a legitimate push for a national championship.
Yeah. So just for context, where are you getting the rankings from? What site is it?
24/7.
24/7. Okay. Yeah. So I think when you look at stacking together top 15 classes, right? 2021 is the outlier there at 23, but ultimately, if you're putting together top 15 classes, that's pretty dang good. Now, the challenge is if you're in the top, if you're 15th overall, right, in your class, you're probably 5th or 6th in the SEC, and that's a little bit of a conference issue there, where you're going to have somewhat of an imbalance in rosters there. But the way that you combat that is with having really good schematics, and Josh Heupel does, at least on the offensive side of the football, and I like what they've done on defense as well. But ultimately, this is a team, according to the blue chip ratio by Bud Elliott, that this is a team that can win a national championship. They're high enough. They have a high enough amount of 4- and 5-star players to go win a national championship. They're above that 50% threshold, and I think that's plenty when you have a couple of standout guys. When you have a Nico Iamaleava, and when you have a James Pearce, right? You've got potentially the number 1 offensive player, number 1 defensive player in college football. Like at this point in the offseason, we can say that could potentially happen. I mean, these two are on a short list of best players in college football as far as potential goes. I tend to think that James Pearce might just be the best player in college football, but we have to wait and see. That's why they play the games. And of course, Nico has the top end talent at the quarterback position. So ultimately, that's what you got to do, though. You got to bring in, these 5-star guys, a couple of them, or guys that have really high potential, and then you got to hit on a few 3-stars, right? You got to find some diamonds in the rough, some guys that you can develop from a 3-star up to a first-round draft pick. And if you're able to do that with a top 15 class, you're going to be in the national championship contentions. And I think Tennessee is going to be that this year.
Yeah, and part of the reason I bring this up too, the proof's kind of in the pudding as well with these numbers, and we're going to move on to the offense and breaking that down here in just a second. But Florida is, if you go look at Florida's recruiting rankings, and I'm sorry to have to bring the Gators up here, but in a lot of those years, the Florida Gators recruited better than the Tennessee Volunteers did. And I know that there's a lot more talent in Florida than there is in Tennessee, but at the same time, everybody and their grandmamas camped out in Florida with a recruiter in a private jet. You know what I'm saying? So everybody's recruiting the state of Florida. So it's not like Florida just gets to, call whoever they want and get them on campus. So my point is, yeah, you're exactly right, Mason. Number 15 in the country is going to be number 5 or number 6 or number 7 in the SEC in recruiting. And this team is really good. Tennessee is a scary team. They do strike some fear into their opponent, but they're 1-3 versus Alabama, 1-3 versus Florida, 0-4 versus Georgia, and I think there's a little bit of a reason for that. Everybody likes to talk about how great Nick Saban was. Well, you know what? Nick Saban, every given Saturday, went out there and he had better players than you did. Pretty much every Saturday that they stepped out on the field from about year 3 on. There was very few games where they weren't the most talented team on the field. And there is something to be said for that. And this team, as I said, definitely in the right direction. I feel like you're just a couple of big hits on the recruiting trail away from really being able to do something special. And as you said, you can't do it without hitting on a couple of 3 stars as well and polishing some diamonds in the rough. Let's jump over to quarterbacks. Everybody knows what's going on at quarterback. Everybody can't wait to see it. It was a very successful bowl game as a team against Iowa there in the Cheez-It Bowl. Nico had some great – I think he had some great moments. I think he had some moments that you would expect from a young man that has waited his turn. I have to tip my hat to Nico. I got a lot of respect for a guy that can sit back, watch the team, play in the bowl game, go into the offseason, keep working hard, knowing that he's going to be the leader of this team. I am really high on Nico. I am. And I am a believer. My biggest concern with him coming in was literally something that I knew he was going to be able to adjust. It was his body weight, his thickness, his durability. It seems as though, and from everything I've heard, I haven't seen Nico in person, but from everything that I've heard, it looks like he's got a little body armor on him this year. And I think that's going to be really important because Nico likes to get out of the pocket every once in a while, Mason. I think this guy's got a little bit of a sicko mentality, man. He don't mind getting out of the pocket, but he's going to have to keep from getting hit because he is a very crucial part to this team. Love the arm strength. I think he's got all the attributes. I like his calm demeanor on the football field. I think that's really important for a quarterback. Has not exactly turned into a on the field general leader type guy yet. But that's hard to do in college football when you don't have the reps. I think we're going to see more of a vocal side of Nico as he gets his feet wet in this offense and as a starter in general. Just to throw this out there as well, I like Gaston Moore. I like Jake Merklinger. Okay. I think those are 2 pretty good backups. I think you get some kind of inexperienced moments out of those 2 guys, especially Jake Merklinger. But I think there is upside for both of those guys. Definitely a lot lower floor than Nico and a lower ceiling, I think, as well. But all in all, I think you got a pretty good room here. What do you think about the quarterbacks heading into 24?
Gaston Moore kind of adds that just in case, that safety net for Nico, because like you said, he is slider built. Coming out of high school, he's 6'5", like a true 6'5" or 6'6", 210 pounds. That's a lanky dude. Now, like you said, he by all accounts, it sounds like he has added 10 or 15 pounds of I'm assuming muscle mostly. That's going to go a long way. I mean, if you're 225, 230, something like that at that weight or at that height, I think that's going to be kind of where he needs to be before he heads to the pro level. But heading into year 2, if he's put on some weight, that's going to help out a ton. Really like what the tools. I mean, he's got tools for days, right? This was the number 2 overall player coming out of 24/7, or coming out of the 2023 class based off of 24/7 Sports, and I think that's for good reason. He's got the build, he's got the arm, he's not afraid to get out of the pocket, scramble a little bit. Good throwing mechanics when he throws on the run. Just that contemporary style of quarterback that these teams are really looking for. I think he's going to be a great fit for Tennessee this year. I am a little bit concerned about his play in the bigger games against Georgia this year. Right, that's not a team that he's faced. I think that we're going to see him in his best, or him potentially at his best in those biggest moments, but we don't really know yet, right? We'll kind of know in week 2 against NC State. I think that's going to be a really tough matchup for Tennessee. We'll get to see him against Oklahoma, which is going to be sort of an emotional game probably for Josh Heupel. So I think we'll know pretty early on what he's going to be in those biggest environments in the SEC. But totally, I think he's got everything that you want in a quarterback, and there are probably 132 other teams in the country that would like to have Nico Iamaleava as their starting quarterback this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Tons of upside. Can't wait to see him. Hey, we've done all the digging. Everybody knows everything you can know about Nico. With the small sample size we've got, everybody knows his recruiting history, all that stuff. All that's left to do is check it out in September and see what's going on. And I'm high on this guy. I think we need to be patient. But I think that Tennessee is going to be able to rely on that running game early and really let him settle into this offense and let him get his beak wet in this thing and get a little bit of experience and some reps and I think he's going to be all the more comfortable for it. It's just hard as a young man, first time starter. The week in and week out is tough, and that's going to be the hardest part for him is the mentality of week in and week out, preparing as the starter. Can't wait to see how he handles it. Let's go to the wide receivers, Mason. This group is much improved from last year, and part of the issue last year was injuries. Brew McCoy, of course, had an injury and ended up holding him out, and he's going to be back or is planning on being back. So I am super, super excited to see him back on the field. He's a unique wide receiver, unique build and skill set. And this offense really needs a guy like that to add some diversity to the room. You got Squirrel White, 803 yards last year. We got to figure out a way to get him some more touchdowns. That was a big part of what we talked about was kind of missing in this offense last year. Joe Milton's accuracy on the deep ball just wasn't really there. We knew that. We had seen Joe Milton for years, right? And we knew that was kind of an issue. And I think it kind of hurt Squirrel White's numbers last year a little bit. He had the yardage, really a lot of work between the 20s with receiving yards, and I think that we're going to be able to see him maybe with 5, 6, 7 touchdowns this year. And I think that will be a big help to this offense. You bring in Chris Brazzell from Tulane, and for all intents and purposes, this might just be the go-to guy. Every time I looked over in the spring game, Nico and this guy, if the offense wasn't on the field, if these two guys weren't on the field together, they were over there talking. And there's obviously a relationship there. And I think these guys I think they're going to bang it out pretty good for the Tennessee Volunteers this year. You got Mike Matthews coming in, and this is a guy out of the 24 class that everybody's been waiting on. And he did not take long to show up, showed up in the spring game in a big way, scored a touchdown I saw, and just looked really good overall. This is a guy that could play offense or defense, honestly. But I'm expecting him to have a role this year. And I'm not saying he's going to have 1,000 yards receiving, but I could definitely see this guy having 300, 400, 500 yards receiving and be a nice accent piece for this team. You got a few guys listed down there that'll kind of be in the rotation. You had Tommy Winton come in from East Tennessee State. Chas Nimrod looked really good in the spring game. Looked like a go-to guy to me. I mean, I felt like I saw him catch more balls in those first 2 quarters than anybody else. And Dante Thornton, who dealt with some injuries last year, he'll be back as well. What do you think about his wide receiver room, Mason? Very deep, high ceiling, I think high floor. What's not to like here? Talk me out of it. What am I missing here? Because I'm in love with this wide receiver room.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got six really good guys, right? And that's probably enough when it comes to depth. They will be challenged. Some of these guys are probably going to get injured at some point. Hopefully, nothing season ending. Hopefully, Brew McCory, especially, I hope for him, he's able to play all 13, 14, 15 games this year, however many they play. But ultimately, I do have a little bit of concern about the depth and what's behind those, starting three and really six guys overall. But yeah, I mean, Squirrel White, he's a great possession wide receiver. Had 67 catches last year, over 800 yards. He's a guy who, you know, you probably won't see get 1,000 yards this year, but has potential to. I think, and the reason I say you probably won't get 1,000 yards is because, this is a team that likes to run the football as well, and there are so many other mouths to feed on this in this wide receiving room. I
Hmm.
really like Chris Brazell and what he brings coming over from Tulane. 711 yards last year, 5 touchdowns. He had 37 first down catches, which is just
Wow.
extremely productive. 53% completion when targeted 20 or more yards downfield, which is just an interesting stat. I think you will see Nico air the ball out a good bit this year, and with that chemistry like you were talking about, this could be a real boom in this offense and in the passing attack for this team, and I'm really excited to see what he's able to do. I think 711 yards last year is really productive. 5 touchdowns. You'd like to see that number come up, but he was playing for Tulane last year. And then kind of I guess you can't really call him a dark horse because the guy was a 5 star at certain times last year. But Mike Matthews, coming over from Parkview High School in Georgia, is an absolute stud. He's a guy everybody wanted. Ends up going to Tennessee, and I think he's going to ball out this year. Dante Thornton's another guy who had an injury late last year, but was starting to come on. If he's able to play like he was um, just before the injury throughout this season, then that's another weapon to look out for as well. But yeah, six really good guys here. I think that this is a pretty complete unit overall.
Yeah, I think so. Barring season-ending injuries, I think this group is even fine if you have one or two guys go down for God forbid 2-3 games or something like that. I think you're going to be able to survive it and be able to make things, especially with that run game. I think the run game's going to be pretty good. So let's kind of get into that. Um, I'm going to repeat what I just said. The running just about the running backs, right? This running back room could be pretty good if everybody stays healthy. And that really, really is going to be on the shoulders of Dylan Sampson. Love the side of this guy. I mean, I think this guy's got a chance to be really special, but that is going to require some durability, Mason. And I'm not so sure that he's durable enough to be the number one guy. A little bit concerning for me. And then you don't have a lot of experience elsewhere. You talked at the top of the video about all the attrition that's taken place in this running back room for good reasons. Guys went on, to do good things, right, at the next level, and that leaves that vacuum leaves a little bit of a hole in the running back room. Um, you got to be glad you got Dylan Sampson coming back, but you can't feel good about the durability that he's put on display so far in his career. What do you think about the running back room?
Samson is just one of the best backs in the SEC in college football. I'm really excited to see what he's able to do this year. He was a 10.5 100-meter guy in high school, forced 31 missed tackles last year in his 106 carries. So, I think with a little bit more production, right, a few more carries, I don't know that that's really going to hurt him too much. Looking at Jalen Wright last year, he had 137 carries. So to go from 106 to 130, I don't know that, durability is going to be too much of an issue with that much of a jump. That's an extra game's worth of load, I guess, which is,
Or
is
two?
saying something. But yeah, but ultimately, I do think that he can be your number one back. That they're going to have to spread the ball though. Cam Seldon's going to have to get involved. Deshaun Bishop also is another guy, a redshirt freshman, who's going to have to get involved, and then of course Khalifa Keith, and then also a guy that they're saying might be the best out of the entire group is the true freshman that came in, Peyton Lewis. They're saying this guy
Mm-hmm.
is having or had a really good spring, and is hopefully carrying that over into fall camp, and could be an extra weapon. So I mean, I just listed 5 running backs right there that can play. So if Sampson's getting banged up and having some issues carrying the load, then maybe you see him with 10 or 15 carries in a slower week, or in a week against some easier opponents. Which, I mean, looking at their schedule, there's not a lot of them, but of just easy opponents, for sure wins, but yeah, maybe in some of those blowout wins, you give him a little bit of a break and let these younger guys carry the load a little bit. But yeah, ultimately, this Dylan Sampson especially is an absolute stud, and really excited to see what he's able to put on film. Got to wait and see who kind of steps up as that number 2 back in this running back room.
Yeah, and before we keep going, I had forgotten to mention freshman Braylon Staley in the wide receiver mentions as well. That's a 4-star coming in this year. You never know, that might be a guy that has to step up for a game or something. I'd hate to leave somebody like that out, but highly recruited guy. Everybody's pretty excited about him as well. I don't think we saw him in the spring. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know in the comment section if he was early enrollee, because I don't remember seeing him. He might be coming in this, at the end of summer. Let's talk about the offensive line real quick. Cooper Mays, we didn't get to see in spring a whole lot. That he's going to be at center. I think you couldn't be any more sturdy at center as long as he's healthy. This guy's got a lot of experience. Look, mixing a senior center with a freshman quarterback is peanut butter and jelly, right? Those two things go together really, really well. You need experience at the center whenever you've got somebody inexperienced taking the snaps. Those are the guys that touch the ball every place, and I think they're in pretty good shape so long as he can stay healthy. Javonte Spraggins is back. John Campbell moves over to the right side there. I think you're really, really good from center right. There's a little bit of a question there at Andres Carrick. I think that's a little bit of a question. You got Lance Hurd coming in on the left side there, and then you got Jackson Lampley and Dane Davis will be kind of your first players off the bench helping out. For all intents and purposes, this is a really good offensive line. I don't really have any worries as long as Cooper Mays doesn't go out, and as long as the questions at left guard can be answered adequately, I think this is an above average, above middle of the pack SEC line. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the right side of this offensive line is shirt out from center to right tackle. Your returning starters there. John Campbell was excellent last year. Only gave up 1 sack, only gave up 8 hurries, and played the entire season. Is a really productive there at the tackle position. He'll do just fine at right tackle. Javonte Spraggins gave up 2 sacks last year and only 10 hurries. And he's a 3-year starter, so a ton of experience there on that right side. And then, we've got a little bit of a competition, like you said, going on at left guard. We'll have to wait and see which of the 3 kind of get that nod.
Yeah.
But the other 2 are going to be utility pieces, right? So, and you've got those are all 5th-year seniors, in that whole bunch. Actually, outside of Carrick, he's a 4th-year senior, but nonetheless, some experience right there in 2 utility pieces, whichever those 2 are. And then Lance Hurd comes over, from LSU, and Mark, he might be the best offensive lineman in this whole unit. I mean, this
Yeah.
guy, from everything that I've heard, is extremely talented, and is kind of running from what could be the best offensive line in college football over at LSU, and is wanting that premier left tackle spot in the SEC. So he's got a little chip on his shoulder, and probably a little something to prove here. And he's just a sophomore, so you're going to get at least 2 more years out of him, maybe 3. Really good transfer addition. Not many offensive tackles or offensive linemen come out of the transfer portal with as much upside and as much talent and gift as Lance Hurd does. I think he's going to be a plug and play, and you're going to have 4 absolute studs on the offensive line. Maybe a little bit of a rotation there at left guard and some things to figure out, but this is a really solid unit and probably the best unit on the team if I had to put my money on it.
Lance Hurd must have got paid.
Yes.
Tight end. Let's talk about it. As you can see, you've got Brian May from Queen over to the far right. That's actually Miles Kitselman. Excuse me. I'm sorry. He comes over from Alabama, not a ton of experience, 3-star guy, but all in all, comes from a championship caliber program. You know, the more the merrier, Mason. You can't have too many big guys that to cycle through there. Ethan Davis, 2 receptions, 33 yards last year, 4-star tight end in 2023. But I think the name most people have paid attention to in the offseason is Holden Stays. Comes over from Notre Dame, 15 receptions, 176 yards, and 4 TDs. I think this is going to be a pretty nice red zone option for this team. Whenever you get into the red zone and you're trying to throw the football, it gets tough, man. It gets really tough. It gets crowded down there. And these big guys are awesome targets to be able to throw short yardage situations to. And I think that's what Holton Stays is going to be able to do, and not to mention provide some help blocking as well for these, this running game that you're going to need to be productive to be able to throw your run your receivers open. What do you think about these tight ends?
Yeah, I mean Ethan Davis is sort of I guess the athlete of the bunch, right? He's the one that everybody's circling as the number 1 tight end and somebody who can come in and be a contributor this year. Battled some injury last year, battled some injury going into spring ball, so probably didn't get the reps, but that's a great opportunity for Holden Stays to come in with a new team, get acclimated and get situated. And really, Holden Stays kind of has a similar archetype at tight end as Ethan Davis, with just a little bit more experience. But both of those tight ends have got to get a little bit more physical, a little bit better in the run game. But for a team like this, I mean, it's going to be nice to have them as pass catching weapons as well. And then Miles Kitselman, he comes over from Alabama, has a little bit more of that physicality, a little bit more of a presence in the run game. Not a ton of experience, almost no experience, at least as a player, but is a good special teams addition. At least at the very least, and then adds another body if you want to go into a 12 personnel sort of a goal line type of set. And then also probably the most impressive thing about Miles Kitselman, guy's a scratch golfer. I mean that. Yeah, he's a scratch golfer, man. That's pretty impressive. I guess if you're not the starter at tight end, you got a little bit more downtime to go out and hit the links a little bit.
Got more time than I do, I guess.
I guess so, but yeah, pretty impressive there. Maybe he is the most athletic of the bunch. Scratch golfing's not easy to do, folks.
Yeah, no. Only scratch golfing I do maybe be with a back scratcher while I'm golfing, because I won't be getting anywhere close to par for the day. But hey, hats off to Miles Kitselman. That shows a lot of touch for a big guy. That's very, very impressive. Anybody can scratch golf, man. That's pretty impressive. Let's talk about this defense, Mason. This is really, I feel like, what's going to control most of the outcome for this team this season. And really, if you want to point to something over the last 3 years that has cost this team, you can go back to 2022, even that great season, the game against South Carolina. And I know people will say Hendon Hooker got hurt. The game was out of hand before Hendon Hooker got hurt, right? The defense just let one slip that night, and in college football, that literally cost Tennessee a college football playoff berth. Didn't know it at the time, but boy, it certainly did. And maybe cost them a national championship. Who knows? Because that was a really good team. I don't think the defense would have held in there for them, but nonetheless, you get the point. This defense is on the up and up, though, Mason. The front seven, for all intensive purposes, is just massively improved. And last year was a good start of that. I think it's going to actually continue to improve. But 22nd scoring defense in the country last year, 20.3 points per game, 12th in rushing yards per game allowed, or excuse me, 12th in rushing yards per attempt allowed, 3.19. That's outstanding. 21st in rushing yards per game allowed, 114. That's really good. This team's really good at the run. The pass has been the question, Mason. Pretty much any stat you want to look at passing wise, this team is, 70th to 50th, somewhere around there. I think that is an improvement upon what had happened in 22. I want to say in 22 they were more like 90th. Really. So I think there were steps made. And look, everybody can say whatever they want to say. You don't change a defense in 1 year. I don't transfer portal or no. Defense is a different thing. I feel like you can reboot an offense in 1 year with transfer portal. I feel like that's certainly possible. Not every team can do it in 1 year, but I think it's possible. Defense, I think it's a lot harder to do that, man. I think it takes a couple years, if not 3 years, to instill, what your standards are as a defense and figure out who's hungry and who's ready to eat off the floor, right? This team, I think, is really starting to get somewhere. 47% returning production in 2024. Tim Banks, I feel like, for all intents and purposes, is money well spent for this team, and good enough to keep around for sure. And I look to see some more improvements this year. Hopefully, for Tennessee fans' sake, some improvements in that secondary. What did you think about the improvements you saw last year in the defense, Mason?
Yeah, I mean, we're continuing to see improvement with this defense, like you said. In particular in the rushing attack, they were one of the best in the country, really, when it came to rushing defense. I think that they're actually going to be a little bit better in that regard this year as well. And then we'll have to see what kind of comes on the back end of the defense. They brought in a lot of new pieces. There's a lot of competition going on in the defensive backfield this year. So excited to see what they're able to do there. If they can take a step forward in the passing attack and in the passing defense, similar to what they have in the rushing defense, then yeah, this will be a pretty complete unit. But haven't seen that yet. And at least on paper this year, there's nothing that indicates that that's going to be just so much better. They could be, but there's a lot of question marks given what they did in the transfer portal.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Let's talk about the defensive line, though, before we move there. And to sit here and talk about this defensive line, you have to start with James Pearce Jr. We were talking about it before we started the recording today. This guy's got a chance to be the best defensive player in college football this year. He has a legitimate chance for that. A lot of things have to happen for that to be able, to come to fruition. But this is a really talented football player. 28 tackles, 14 and a half TFLs last year, 11 sacks. I think this guy's about to have a big year, Mason, and I feel like he has even better players around him this year to be able to take some of the attention off of him, maybe some of the double teams off of him. You've got less option to run away from him this year, I feel like. You still need some of these guys to, step up and come into their own as well around him, but I think James Pearce Jr. is about to have a really, really good time this year. But this is probably it is the most well-stocked cabinet of any position room on the defense. Am I wrong on saying that? Because I feel like this defensive line unit kind of snuck up on me, actually. I think this is going to be one of the better ones in not only the SEC, I think maybe the country.
Right.
What do you think about this group? There's lots of guys waiting in the wings. You've got guys coming back from last year with experience. They're going to contribute from, a second string role, rotational roles. You got two full defensive lines that I think you can roll out there and compete with. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the slide that we just had pulled up, 47% returning production on defense. Most of that's coming from the defensive line. Most of
Yeah.
it's coming from the front seven as a whole, and it's coming from the two deep. It's not just the starters. That they had a lot of success, really, the ones and the twos there, and it's all led by James Pearce Jr. Look, this is my pick to be the number one pick in the draft for the 2025 NFL draft. I think he's got all the tools. Guy had 10 sacks last year, 28 quarterback hurries, and had a 22% pass rush win rate. That's a stat that doesn't get thrown out too much, but if you're in the double digits, that's excellent. And he was at 22%.
That's better than 1 out of 5. I mean,
That's right. Yeah,
that's
that you're
outstanding.
beating your guy if they're dropping back to pass in pass coverage. That's really really good. And I think that he's just going to be absolutely must watch TV this year. Tennessee fans are in for a treat this year on defense. I think he's going to be really fun to watch. And then kind of the leader of this group is Amari Thomas. Really big guy, 6'4", 325, kind of a space eater, but he is the catalyst. He's the glue for this defensive line. He's the guy who takes on two blockers at once, frees up that space for James Pearce or Dominic Bailey coming off the edge there, so that they can have a one-on-one and go get the quarterback right. Really important piece of this puzzle here. Probably a guy that gets overlooked just a little bit from a national sense. And then you've got Dominic Bailey, who is lacking production so far, hasn't had as much time. He's one of those guys stepping up into a bigger role this year. But behind him, you've got Tyree West, who I think is equally as hungry, and somebody who can play. Former four-star guy, and a guy who can absolutely play, kind of a twitchy guy coming off the edge there. And then backing up Bryson Eason, or really, I don't know. I don't know if you can say that Bryson Eason's the starter, because I think that Omar Norman Lott probably statistically had a better season last year. He had 6 tackles for a loss, 5.5 sacks, and he's another guy who was in that double-digit pass rush win rate at 12% almost. So somebody who does a really good job on the interior. If you're getting 12% on the interior of the defensive line, that's extremely impressive. Again, going back to Amari Thomas, he's really complementing that defensive tackle position well, because if you double team the nose tackle in Amari Thomas, you don't have two guys you can throw on the defensive tackle. So one of those big boys is getting free, and a lot of times that's Omar Norman Lott. As you can see, he was very productive last year. But I think I've just listed off like 7 or 8 guys right there. Look, there's only 4 positions, right? There are dudes. They can roll in ones and twos and have little to no drop off. And then the good thing about the team and what they returned this year is that, like you said, there's talent behind these guys who are waiting in the wings, waiting, just itching for the opportunity to play. A few of them will get that opportunity this year and get a chance to step up, and I think that the cupboards are fully stocked at the defensive line room for Tennessee for years to come. This is a unit that we'll be talking about on the Tennessee defense for a while.
For sure. For sure. And let's jump through these linebackers and cornerbacks. I'm itching to get to the schedule, and not so much itching to get to work, but it's something I have to do. So let's get this going. We could just talk. We could do 2-hour breakdowns on these teams, because I mean, you can really get in a rabbit hole on these things, and it is pretty fun. It's kind of addictive once you get going on it. This linebacker room is really going to depend on Keenan Pili, right? Him and Arian Carter are going to be, I think, for all intents and purposes, your 2 starters. You got a guy, Jeremiah Turlander, that got a lot of playing time last year due to some injuries. You got Caleb Perry, that's going to be, kind of a rotational guy as well in that second string. Look, Keenan Pili, I feel like I'm saying Keenan Peel. Keenan Pili, 194 tackles, 11.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. Those are career stats, not last year. Obviously, that would be incredible. But he's a really good talent. Had some injury, issues, as a lot of people do. I don't think there's any reason to think that he couldn't come in and be productive this year. We'll just have to see how the injury situation goes. What do you think about these four guys, the two linebackers in the 4-2-5 system?
Yeah, so my read on the situation is, Keenan Peely's obviously your leader in this unit and sort of your field general on the defensive side of the football. And Arian Carter and Jeremiah Talander are going to be competing this year for that second spot. Right now, I would say that Carter is leading, but you've got two sophomores there who are really talented, and are going to be playing a lot. I mean, both of them I think will see the field in some capacity. So that'll be interesting to watch. And then also just a freshman to watch is Edwin Spillman, who came over and did some really good things in the spring and I think in the offseason. So just a little name to note. He may be a little bit too tough to keep off of the field come
Who
October and November.
and who was that, Mason, that you just said?
That's Edwin Spillman.
Okay, well, I'm going to add another player to watch for that linebacker room, Jordan Ross, top 10 player nationally coming in through high school. This is a guy that's going to be a freshman, but you know how some of these freshmen, do. If you're a top 10 player, you're going to attract attention and could possibly see this guy. If there's an injury or two, you never know. You just
Yeah.
never know. So
Well,
somebody that we definitely want to keep our eye on.
yeah, and I think Ross is kind of playing that outside linebacker, that Leo position. He's going to be sort of a backup, kind of buried on the depth chart behind James Pearce. But the future
On
James
at the
Pearce,
end.
yeah, well, not really at end. He's playing the Leo, which is it's kind of an end. It's a down lineman. You may see, kind of play in that zone space from time to time, but kind of a hybrid in type of position, but outside
That's a
linebacker. I mean, he's an outside linebacker pretty
Leo.
much.
Yeah. If that's the case, then they probably need to wait because Leo in a 4-2-5 is a very tough position to play.
Oh yeah.
Nickelback and Leo are the two hardest positions to play on a 4-2-5. And so maybe in that case you wait. But we'll see how it goes. I'm super interested to see lots of young talent on this Tennessee team. Secondary, man, there's just a lot of new going on here, right, Mason? Key roster additions, Jared McCoy, cornerback over from Oregon State, 31 tackles, 2 interceptions, 7 pass deflections in 2023. Really nice pickup there. Jacoby Thomas, a safety coming over from Middle Tennessee State University, 104 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 4 interceptions. Had a pick 6 as well in his career. These are career stats there for Jacoby Thomas. You've got Jalen McMurray. Yeah, I believe he came over from Temple. You got Boo Carter coming in, making a lot of noise as a freshman coming in. Hey, he was listed as number 1 on the depth chart that I looked at. So I threw him on there, and I mean, the coaches are talking about him. Other players are talking about him. Where there's smoke, there's fire. I think we're going to get, whether he starts or not, we're going to see a good bit of Boo Carter, it sounds like to me. And then you've got Ricky Gibson over there at the other corner spot. We've got some guys coming from smaller schools, and so it's kind of hard, and coming from high school in some cases. It's kind of hard to understand on paper how these guys are going to translate to Division One SEC football. Um, if there's a weak unit on this defense, it's got to be the secondary, right? And I hate to say that again. I know Tennessee fans are like, "Holy shit, again!" But I think that's just where we're kind of at. I think it's going to be a lot better than 2022. It might be a little bit better in 2023, but I just don't know enough about these guys, working as a group or anything to really go out on a limb and say that. So I'm thinking that this probably is about the same level of secondary that we saw last year, maybe a little bit better. What you think I'm off on that? What's your take on it?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'm really confident in three of these positions, right? If they're starting, and number one is Jermod McCoy, coming over from Oregon State. Look, this is a guy who got a chance to play late last year. They had a couple of really good cornerbacks, if you remember, at Oregon State. One of them goes
Yeah.
down, and Jermod McCoy steps in, and I believe it was in the Oregon game. He steps in as the starter and was pretty much locked down. I mean, this guy was playing. Of course, they're targeting him. A true freshman coming in at cornerback, and was a really physical. So in a short season, he was able to amass 31 tackles, 2 interceptions, 7 pass breakups, and a 57% completion when targeted. I think he's a true lockdown cornerback and a guy who's just heading into his sophomore season. So you're going to get to see at least 2 more years out of him. I feel really good. I probably feel most confident in that position on this defensive secondary. Of the whole defensive secondary, I guess. And then second for me is the Middle Tennessee transfer, Jacoby Thomas, coming over at safety. Another guy that's been really highly talked about this offseason. I think you've got a bona fide guy in him. Boo Carter, coming up as a freshman, is one that it's tough to be confident in a true freshman, right? But given the buzz we've heard, given the fact that he was ranked as high as 39th in the country by rivals coming out of his class last year, I feel pretty good about him as a player. I don't know if he's going to be ready to play right away, but it sounds like, based on everything that we've heard, that he totally is. And then we're going to have to wait and see kind of who steps up in those other two positions. You got Ricky Gibson at the other cornerback position. He's just a sophomore and is pretty talented in that regard. And then you've got two players behind him. Redshirt freshman Jordan Matthews, and then a true freshman in Caleb Beasley, who I say Beasley. It could be Farouk as well. Two talented DBs that came out of last year's class. John Slaughter is another guy to mention. Playing more of a safety role, but some young talent behind these guys. I think that you're going to see some musical chairs being played this offseason at the strong safety and the right cornerback spot. But if Boo Carter is able to lock down that star position, I think that really takes this unit from weak to at least competent, as far as a group. If you've got 3 out of 5 bona fide DBs in this 4-2-5, then I think you're in a pretty good spot, and you can sort of mask the other two a little bit in different coverage and things that you do. But yeah, so some weapons for sure, but it's all new, right? So it's hard to say whether or not they're going to get better.
Yeah, and the star spot, it sounds like it could be up for grabs. Kind of like what you're saying there. Look, I'll be honest with you. I saw Jalen McMurray get burned a couple times in the spring game. And I know he's coming and trying to get used to. I mean, imagine coming onto this team. I'm sure a lot of the defense sees this offense every day. He comes onto the team, doesn't know Tennessee's offense, never played them or anything. And then you've got to come in there and not only pick up the defense, but figure out what this offense is doing as well. He was a little confused out there, Mason. And you've got junior Jordan Thomas, you got Jalen McMurray, you got Andre Turrentine. You've talked about Boo Carter moving over there. I just can't emphasize how important that nickel position is in this type of defense. And I think you're right. There's going to be some moving around that goes on and some tinkering that goes on by the defensive coordinator, hopefully to get the 5 most talented guys on the field in the secondary. I think that's the number one priority at this point. Let's look at the 2024 schedule, Mason. We've got some interesting games this year, brother. You start off with an easy one, Chattanooga. You go on that's a neutral site against NC State. You got Kent State there at home. Oklahoma, is going to be an away game there. October 5th, you've got Arkansas, and that's going to be on the road. You've got Florida at home this year after the travesty that happened at Ben Hill Griffin last year. So that will be very welcome. That's going to be a very big game for this team to hit their goals for the year. You've got Alabama at home, Kentucky at home, Mississippi State at home, Georgia on the road. That's going to be a very tough game there. UTEP at home, and you end the season with Vandy at Vandy, everybody's favorite road game in the SEC. Look, I'm just going to come right out and say it. NC State's going to be a tough game. I think Tennessee can win that game. Oklahoma's going to be a tough game. I think Tennessee can win that game. Now, let me preface it with this: Oklahoma, that's going to be a lit environment. That's going to be an absolutely lit. That'll be, if not the first SEC game at Oklahoma, it'll be one of the first, right? That place is going to be packed out every single game. It already is, and with them going in the SEC this year, that place is going to be raucous, absolutely raucous. Should be fine with Arkansas. If Tennessee loses to Florida this year, then there's like literally a curse, right? That's some kind of voodoo magic on this team if they can't beat Florida this year. In my opinion, I just there's no reason for it. Florida's, they got Graham Mertz coming back, but they're also going to be playing a freshman quarterback, some in DJ Lagway. This defense ought to have something for them, especially that defensive line. There's no way Florida's running the football like they did last year on this team. No excuses. Tennessee should win that game. I think you lose to Alabama, and I think you lose to Georgia. And I believe that's just 2 losses, right? That's only 2 that and I think that is the ceiling for this team. Mason is 10-2. Most college football teams lose a game they're not supposed to, though. And if I had to pick one, a game that you're not supposed to lose that you could lose, I think it's NC State, Mason. It's neutral site. You're early on in a quarterback's career, or early on in some running backs' career. Lots of guys that are going to be getting their feet wet, defensively, offensively, both. I think that's a kind of a scary game. Everybody should be up for it. It's not a trap game necessarily. But let me elaborate on the Georgia and Alabama thing, because really it's kind of simple in my mind, Mason. We've watched Tennessee beat Alabama in 22. That was a crazy game. I don't know how you could predict a replication of anything like that. I don't think that's what's going to be happening this year. But for the most part, Alabama and Georgia kind of have Tennessee's number as far as this offense goes. Whenever you go hurry up, I think there's some advantages to that, and Tennessee has benefited from some of those advantages. But when you go hurry up and then you go 3 and out, like they've done a lot against Alabama and Georgia over the last few years, guess what? Your defense is right back on the field. This is the best defense that Tennessee's had in a few years, in my opinion. But it doesn't matter if your offense is going 3 and out and then making the defense jump right back out there against teams that would love to grind you into a pile of dust, right? So I haven't seen an offensive game plan that has really worked against either of those teams, minus the Alabama game in 22. And I don't want to piss anybody off or anything, but I just feel like this is a little bit of a gimmicky offense. Tennessee really takes care of opponents they're supposed to take care of for the most part, exempt Florida last year. But I got to see it. I got to see it happen. Georgia's going to be a really talented defense this year. I don't like this offense in that situation at Georgia. Alabama's going to be a really tough game. They're going to be able to run the snot out of the football. So give me Georgia, give me Alabama in those games. Probably going to lose one you shouldn't. Arkansas is kind of a scary game, Mason. I'm not going to lie to you. You never know. You could lose to Florida. Like I said, that if they lose to Florida, it's a curse. I'm convinced. Give me 9-3 for this team this year, Mason. What are your thoughts?
Well, so you're saying 9-3 overall.
I'm saying 2 losses, Alabama and Georgia,
sure.
And a loss you're not supposed to lose.
Yeah,
like
so
most
you would
college
say
football
9.5 would be your over under, something like
Yes.
that. Yeah. I tend to agree with you. I think 9.5 is a pretty fair over under for this schedule. I do think that they're going to be able to pull off one of the wins against Alabama or Georgia, given that Georgia is going to be played in Athens. I think that the Alabama game is one that you circle and you kind of look at and say, guys, we could win this game. Overall, Alabama's coming to us. We saw what happened in 2022 with a worse team, And I think Tennessee is better this year in 2024 than they were in 2022. I think Alabama is a step down from where they were in 2022, this year in 2024. So I do believe that Tennessee can win that game. And we'll have to see later in the season if that's one that I still feel comfortable with halfway through the season. But at this point, I think I'm circling that and saying, Tennessee can go win this game. But I do agree with you that they will drop one that they're not supposed to. They'll be favored in, I think, every other game outside of Alabama and Georgia. I think they pulled the upset against Alabama and then dropped a game. It could be NC State. We just did a breakdown on them. If you haven't watched that, I encourage you to go back and watch that NC State breakdown, because you might be surprised to find that NC State is loaded. That's a really good team there coming out of the ACC. But when we talk about recruiting like we did earlier, they're not a top 15 recruiting team. So, no. Tennessee's got the roster advantage over them. But Oklahoma is going to match up with Tennessee really well when it comes to recruiting, and that game being played in Norman. If I'm picking two losses on the schedule, and I do think that Tennessee is going to go 10-2 and be in the college football playoff, by the way, but I'm thinking that the road game against Oklahoma, the road game against Georgia are going to be the two that they lose. Norman's going to be ruckus, like you said. It's going to be Nico Iamaleava's first SEC start, first road start as well. I think that he's going to be in for a little bit of a rude awakening, and then maybe settle in and kind of figure things out when it comes to the Arkansas game. He does get a bye heading into Arkansas the week before, so I think that the schedule kind of works in his favor a little bit for that Arkansas game. But yeah, Oklahoma to me is one that I think that Tennessee could end up losing, and honestly not feel too bad about. I'm pretty high on Oklahoma this year, so that's not a knock on Tennessee at all to lose to Oklahoma.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, and Tennessee fans, tell us where we're wrong. We'd love to hear from you. What games are you worried about? What games are you confident in? Are you beating Alabama this year? Are you beating Georgia this year? I'd love to hear it. We're a couple of Georgia fans. We're a couple of SEC guys. But you know what? We'll root for Tennessee, right, until they play the Georgia Bulldogs, and then we'll root for our dogs. But look, all we've tried to do today is just give our fair assessment of the team. I think Tennessee is a team heading in the right direction, and I know fans have got to be ecstatic about what Josh Heupel has got going on in Knoxville. By the way, I've been to Knoxville. I've sat in that stadium right there on the banks of the river, and I've seen what can be done in that stadium. I was at the game in 22. Was it 22 or maybe it was 21? But anyway, look, I've seen what that stadium looks like when Tennessee is on fire. I said it the night that I was in the stadium, if Tennessee can ever get this thing going, this is going to be a nearly impossible place to win. And I think that they're at that point where it's going to be really, really tough to go into Knoxville and get a win. And by the way, there's lots of home games this year, so go ahead and get your tickets now. And go watch the breakdowns of all these other teams that we're doing. They're right there on our channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. That helps other college football fans find the good news about their team, so we certainly appreciate that. But until we see you next time on the First and Long College Football Show, I'm Marcus, that's Mason, signing off. You all have a great day. We are just, as the day this is released, 24 days out from kickoff, baby. We're almost there. Don't forget to hit subscribe. We got lots of content coming towards you. Mason, have a good one, buddy. I'll see you next time.